See, whenever this question arises in India, how did India get independence? Only one name comes to everyone's mind, Gandhiji.
Mahatma Gandhi was known for his campaigns of civil disobedience centered around nonviolence. His leadership helped India gain independence after nearly a century of British rule.
He led a peaceful resistance movement to free India from British rule.
Gandhi was able to use nonviolence as an effective tool in undermining the colonial regime.
Gandhi became known worldwide, and the British began to lose their grip on India.
Since the 70 years of independence, that's what we have been taught, and that's what we have been believing. Narrating the exact same story. Big Oscar-winning movies too have been made.
And the winner is Ben Kingsley and Gandhi.
The winner is Richard Attenborough for Gap.
Basically, we politely requested the British that, sir, please leave the country and go. And the British said, okay, fine. As you are saying it so lovingly, then we shall leave. Just stop crying, please.
India's becoming free has to do more with Subhash Chandra Bose than anybody.
But what if I told you the story we have been taught is wrong? What if I told you that we got our freedom not because of Gandhiji and Congress's Satyagraha and the extreme non-violence, but because of our revolutionaries, especially Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and Azad Hind Fauj? So, like I said, we have always been taught in our history textbooks that we got our freedom because of Gandhiji's and Congress Satyagraha and extreme non-violence. Seeing their non-violence, the hearts of the British melted like the polar ice caps of Antarctica.
गांधी जी ने इतिहास को देखा था और उनका मानना था कि यहाँ पर फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन हुई, रशियन रेवोल्यूशन हुई, दोनों वायलेंट रेवोल्यूशंस थी। उन्होंने अपनी मोनार्की को तो ओवरथ्रो कर दिया, लेकिन उसके बाद जो आया वो कुछ अच्छा नहीं था। उसके बाद से फिर से डिक्टेटरशिप की प्रॉब्लम खड़ी हो गई, क्योंकि वायलेंस के रिस्पॉन्स में अगर वायलेंस किया जाएगा तो सोल्यूशन कभी नहीं निकलेगा, उनका ये मानना था। अगर हमें सही में लॉन्ग लास्टिंग सोल्यूशन चाहिए तो वो नॉन वायलेंस से ही अचीव किया जा सकता है, जो फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन और रशियन रेवोल्यूशन नहीं अचीव कर पाए।
Now see, I respect Gandhiji, the work, the sacrifice he made for his country. I respect it. But unfortunately, the story is not true. And why is the story not true? Before we can understand that, we must first know some basic facts regarding the freedom struggle or movements that were carried out by Gandhiji and Netaji. What were the ideological differences between them throughout the freedom struggle? Because look, unfortunately in our history textbooks, Netaji's contribution has been completely ignored. We all know that Gandhiji wanted to get freedom for India through ahimsa and extreme non-violence. He loved the extreme non-violence so much that the ongoing civil disobedience movement in the whole country was cancelled due to one violent incident in Sauri Saura. But in spite of being so in love with non-violence, Gandhiji at the time of World War II told all the Indians that you join the British Army and fight World War II for the British. In comparison to Gandhi's ideology, Netaji Bose used to believe that without violence and without seeing the actual power of the Indians, the British will not give us freedom and live. The ideological differences between Gandhiji and Netaji has been also showcased in films made on Netaji Bose.
क्या आपको नहीं लगता कि विश्व युद्ध का फायदा उठाकर अगर हमने अंग्रेजों को बाहर नहीं धकेला तो ऐसा मौका फिर नहीं आएगा?
गलत है। दुश्मन को उसकी मुसीबत के समय दबाना गलत है। ये युद्ध समाप्त हो जाने दो, फिर हम अपनी स्वतंत्रता के लिए लड़ लेंगे।
फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर में भी तो हमने उनकी मदद की थी, बदले में हमें क्या मिला बाबू? रॉलेट एक्ट, जलियांवाला बाग। इस बार भी अगर हम चूक गए बाबू तो शिकंजा इस कदर कस जाएगा कि हम सदियों तक गुलाम रहेंगे।
Netaji Bose's parents used to worship Ma Durga. Netaji grew up listening to the stories of Mahabharata and Ramayana. He had learned from Vedas and Upanishads. He was inspired by gurus like Ramakrishna Paramhansa and Swami Vivekananda. Netaji always kept the Bhagavad Gita with him, and he believed that the Bhagavad Gita teaches this to all people, that to fight injustice and protect Dharma, sometimes it becomes necessary to take up arms.
यहाँ तुम एक काम क्यों नहीं करते? बापू से कहो कि अंग्रेजों को समझाए कि वर्ल्ड वॉर 2 अहिंसा के मार्ग पे चल के जीत लें। ये सारी अहिंसा हम हिंदुस्तानियों के लिए क्यों है? नहीं तो कुछ लड़ाइयां ना सिर्फ अहिंसा से नहीं जीती जाती। बापू कभी नहीं मानेंगे कांग्रेस नहीं मानेगी।
Netaji Bose used to disagree with Gandhiji on political and economic fronts as well. Gandhiji wanted cottage industries. Instead, Netaji wanted to mix capitalism and socialism to mass industrialize the country. But as far as how to get independence is concerned, in that we can clearly see that there were fundamental differences between Gandhiji and Netaji. So taking those differences into account, why am I saying this? That we didn't get independence because of Gandhiji's non-violence. I am presenting this argument because if we study Indian history between 1942 and 47, then the basic facts tell us a different story. Because the big movement of Gandhiji and Congress to expel the British from India was the Quit India movement of 1942, which started, failed, and ended in 1942 itself. If India had gained freedom because of the Quit India movement of Gandhiji and Congress, then why didn't the British leave India in 1942 itself? On the contrary, considered India as their in-laws' house. After staying put for extra 5 years, why did they leave in 1947? Because look, between 1942 and 47, two important things happened. First, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose rebuilt the Indian National Army, that is the Azad Hind Fauj. After announcing to free Mother India, he also declared war on the British. From 1943 to 1945, the Azad Hind Force also fought many wars against the British. And after the end of the war in 1945 and 46, the British conducted public trial of the captured officers of the Indian National Army at Red Fort, humiliated them publicly and punished them publicly. The British felt that in this way, if the officers of the Indian National Army were publicly punished, then the Indians would look at these officers as traitors and will support the British. But this trick of the British backfired, means the enemy got all the advantage. According to Philip Mason, who in 1946 was secretary to the English War Department, said Indians started looking at the officers of the Indian National Army not as traitors but as patriots. The Indians saw that the officers of the Indian National Army were fighting against the British invaders to try and liberate Mother India. According to historian Niraj Chaudhuri, seeing the public trial of the Indian National Army's officers, there was so much anger in the country that riots broke out in different corners of the country. Historians also believe that in 1942, after the failure of Quit India movement, the Congress was in a very bad shape, and the popularity of Congress had also reduced a lot among the people of India. The Congress saw that there is so much support among Indians for the Indian National Army, so they thought that if they started supporting the Indian National Army, then support for them too will increase. That's exactly what they did. By supporting the Indian National Army, they themselves came close to power. The other big thing that happened is that because of the Indian National Army, the Indian soldiers who were serving in the British Army, even their hearts started losing faith in the British. According to historian Sumit Sarkar, when the Indian soldiers of British Army were fighting with the officers of INA, who were Indians themselves, seeing this, the hearts of the Indian soldiers of the British Army too started losing faith in the British and began building anger for the British. We finally saw the result of this anger in 1946, at a time when the public trials of Indian National Army's officers were being conducted at Red Fort. At that time, a major mutiny started in the Royal Indian Navy. The ones who were rebelling, they raised slogans in support of Netaji Bose and the Indian National Army and demanded from the British government that the Indian National Army's officers whose trials were going on, they be cleared of all charges. And this rebellion of the Navy started getting support from people across the country.
जो सिविलियंस थे दे स्टॉप्ड ओबेइंग द ब्रिटिश ऑर्डर्स, फिर उनको आर्मी को लाना पड़ा. सिविलियंस पर फायरिंग हुई मुंबई में, कराची में, विशाखापट्टनम में.
This rebellion slowly started spreading to other branches of the armed forces as well. The news started coming in to the British government that in different garrisons, for example in Madras and Pune garrisons, the Indian soldiers refused to obey the orders of the British officials. According to Peter Fay and Sumit Sarkar, the public trials that were being held of the Indian National Army, whose trials basically in 1945 became the biggest inspiration of independence among the people of India. According to British historian Christopher Bailey, The Indian National Army, despite being defeated, became the deadliest enemy of the British government. In fact, Gandhiji himself also acknowledged this, that Netaji Bose and the Indian National Army has given a new motivation to the independence movement of the whole country. These historical facts have also been acknowledged by people like Dr. Ambedkar. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar clearly gave the credit to Netaji Bose and the Indian National Army for India's independence.
Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, in his last interview, and he gave to the BBC, to Francis Watson, Babasaheb Ambedkar has touched upon this point with how and why India became free, and he also said that Gandhi's role was almost negligible. British were not much troubled by the cult of ahimsa, and the reason they left is because of Subhash Bose and because Netaji caused rumblings within the Indian armed forces, and that's why they decided that they could no longer control this country because the armed forces were not on their side.
Another big proof comes from Clement Attlee, who at the time of India's independence was the Prime Minister of Britain. Once while traveling in India, an Indian journalist at that time asked him,
"Why did you leave the country? Because the Quit India movement had failed in 42, but you left in 46, 47. Why did you leave suddenly, and what was the main reason?"
That time he said,
"Because of Subhash Bose, and because of Subhash Bose, there was a near revolt in the armed forces, and that's why they left this country."
Barunde, who is another respected historian of India, he also asked Clement Attlee the same question, and Clement Attlee gave the exactly same answer, that Netaji Bose and the Indian National Army was responsible for Indian independence. So if we see the history between 1942 and 47, see the facts, it becomes quite clear that Netaji Bose and the Indian National Army directly had a bigger hand than Gandhiji or the Congress in getting India's independence. But unfortunately, by supporting Netaji Bose and the INA, after getting independence and after getting into power, Congress basically betrayed Netaji just like Katappa. So after independence, after coming to power, the Congress party started teaching in all the textbooks, in all the media, that through Gandhiji's and Congress ahimsa and extreme non-violence, India gained the independence. Perhaps they must have felt that if the whole of India comes to know this, that because of Netaji Bose and the Indian National Army, we got independence, then how will they rule this country for decades? People will start asking them why you and your kids are sitting on this seat like you got it as a gift from your father-in-law after marriage. That's why I said that Netaji Bose and the Indian National Army, by inspiring the India's population and by creating a feeling of rebellion in the Indian armed forces, gave India independence from the British. I want to add one more point, that if Gandhiji's ideology of non-violence is so powerful, for so many years after the independence of the country, why have we never followed that ideology in this country?
अपने आप में बोलना कि हम लोग धरने पे बैठे थे और अंग्रेज चले गए, अरे भैया अहिंसा से तो दिल्ली में आपका किराएदार मकान नहीं छोड़ता। आजाद भारत में गांधी जी का रास्ता कब हम लोगों ने फॉलो किया? हमने कब फॉलो किया? क्या हमने कश्मीर में फॉलो किया? क्या हमने मणिपुर में फॉलो किया? क्या हमने गोवा में फॉलो किया? तो क्या ये बेकार के ढकोसले सुबह शाम आप दे रहे हो कि शांति के रास्ते पे सारा काम हो जाएगा और गांधी जी को आप गलत से रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हो?
To the extent the biggest supporters of Gandhiji in the left wing do not follow this ideology. When the CAA protests took place, it started with non-violence and ended with riots. When the farmers' protest was going on, it started with non-violence and ended with riots. So when we ourselves do not believe in Gandhiji's extreme non-violence, then why the hell would the British believe it? That's why the steps the government is taking today, I am happy with that. Because today, after almost 75 years of independence, we have started crediting the contributions of Netaji Bose in this country. The Modi government has recently installed a statue of Netaji near one of the most famous landmarks of India, very close to the Parliament building of India, so that the whole of India remembers by whose sacrifice our country got freedom and how was it achieved. Because remember, the culture of our country believes that non-violence is the greatest dharma, but also acknowledges that violence in the defense of dharma is equally important. And I want to ask you, do you agree with this video? Do you also believe that Netaji Bose and Indian National Army had a bigger hand than Gandhiji and Congress in getting independence for India? Yes or no, do agree or disagree? Let me surely know in the comment section below.